Paul, Wall Street has come up time and time again, admittedly more in the Democratic fight than it has in the Republican fight. But Wall Street having to take Donald Trump more seriously after this Nevada win, is that likely to have any implications on his economic policy?
I think it's going to be very interesting. As Dylan pointed out, there hasn't been that many specifics just yet about Donald Trump's economic plans. What we do know is that, like many Republicans, he supports a simplification of the tax code in the United States, tax reform. What is a problem, though, is that what he has also said, and it sounds almost Democratic, is that he would not touch Social Security or Medicare except for trying to eliminate waste and fraud. And one of the problems with his tax plan is that if he is going to cut taxes pretty drastically but not do anything to those big entitlement programs, many people think that that would have the deficit that's already very high balloon even further in the next decade. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not he gets hammered about that specific plan in the coming weeks and months.
To those of us here on the other side of the Atlantic, a lot of his rhetoric sounds very, very protectionist for America.
Oh, that is a definite concern, I think, on the part of Wall Street. When you already have a lot of people worried about the devaluation of China's currency and the ripple effects that's had on the global markets, the worst thing that we could possibly have is a full-blown trade war, not just China and some of its Asian partners, but a possibility of a President Trump with this really bombastic protectionist rhetoric about we're going to take jobs back from China and Japan and Mexico. No one wants to see a trade war when the global economy is as fragile as it is right now. So maybe Donald Trump tones down that talk a little bit if it becomes even more inevitable that he's going to win the GOP nomination, because I would have to think that whoever is the Democratic nominee would point out pretty astutely that Donald Trump's current plans would do enormous damage to the American people because a trade war hurts everyone.
Can the U.S. economy, is it in a good enough state to cope with a populist president in America? Somebody with some really strong populist rhetoric and policies.
I think just because of the structure of the way the U.S. government works, I think it probably can. I mean, let's be honest. We would have a populist president if Donald Trump were elected to the Oval Office, but we wouldn't necessarily have a populist Congress. And if Democrats are able to gain control of both House and Senate, which, may not happen, we would likely see a lot more gridlock. I mean, gridlock, I think, has become the norm. So if anything, I think we would have a continuation of some of the frustrating policies we've had over the past few years, where there's a lot of inaction and then central banks have to step up to try and stimulate the economy. And on that point, what a President Donald Trump would do to the Federal Reserve is very interesting. He just tweeted a few days ago that it's important to audit the Fed, so he's really, going along the lines of Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, who both support that as well. What would happen to Janet Yellen? Would she stick around for another term? Who would Donald Trump appoint as a head of the Federal Reserve? These are very interesting and important questions that need to be answered.